Hey, one and all. Okay, here we are. Another edition of the Rebel Spirituality Podcast. And I want to talk about something that has been, well, it was a theme for my life for a long, long time. And that was anxiety, or to be precise, trying to just get rid of it, right? Because the truth, well, for me, my truth was that I used to go around telling everybody, or at least thinking to myself, like, I'm an anxious guy. I had plenty of evidence for that, right? Some of my earliest memories from school, but pretty much my earliest memory from school was sitting at the front of the class and freaking out because I couldn't remember where my PE bag was and just being distraught. And my teacher, she was trying to give me a book, for good reading or something like that. And I was just like freaking out internally. And I just had experiences of anxiety. And when I was a teenager, I had quite strong OCD. And yeah, so by the time I was in my teens, it was my mission to try and rid myself of that anxiety. And I had this story about myself, like I'm an anxious guy. It had become a part of my identity. And yeah, I spent years running away from it. I spent years running away from it with alcohol, with different drug use, with spirituality. I was effectively addicted to anything I thought was going to save me from my anxiety. And I really thought it was a problem. I thought it was a big deal. And I wasn't going to rest until I'd banished it. And anytime I was living and I didn't have huge waves of anxiety, I thought I was winning. I thought I was doing it right. And anytime I did, I'd get locked into this kind of problem thinking about it. And that went on for a long, long time. And I had some really beautiful realizations, some really deep spiritual realizations through my 20s, through my teens. It was amazing. And yet I had this thing strapped to me. It was like a ball and chain I was carrying this idea around. And then at some point I realized, just for the first time, oh, dude, like, you're not an anxious person. You're not, like, that's not who you are. You're not defined by that. You just feel anxious sometimes. You have these waves of feeling and anxiety, and that's okay. Like, that's okay. It's safe. See, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was safe. I hadn't realized that. It was in conversations in and around the three principles world and that kind of thing, I started to realize, whoa, okay. Anxiety isn't the problem here. And the craziest things started to happen. The moment I dropped my resistance to it and actually allowed anxiety when it was there and sat with it, didn't turn it into a problem, it was crazy. It showed up less often. And it makes perfect sense to me, right? The truth is I stopped getting anxious about my anxiety because I just didn't care as much if it was there. Like it comes and it goes. It wasn't a big deal. I didn't have a huge story about it. It wasn't part of who I am. And so I kind of give that bit of preamble because if you're someone who says that statement, I'm anxious, I'm an anxious person, or it could be anything. I'm an unhappy person. I'm this, I'm that, whatever it might be. That's not who you are. That's not who you really are. You're so much more than any feelings or sensations that might move through you. And yeah, that's interesting. So, the title of this show, Hi, I'm Anxious, Nice to Meet You, it made me smile because quite often when I'm working with people these days, they'll make a statement like that, almost as if it's their name. They'll say, yeah, I'm anxious. And sometimes I'll say, hi, I'm Sam. It's nice to meet you, just to bring some lightness into the scenario. And it seems to really help. It wakes us up to this reality of the fact that that's not a fixed identity. So here's something to sit with this week. What if that were true? What if you're not an anxious person? What if it's not who you are? What if it's just a sensation, a feeling, something that comes and goes? Now, something I've found, it's kind of like a beautiful irony. I kind of alluded to it just before, is that the more we realize the inherent safety of our psychological experience, the more we allow feelings in and the more we are with them, the more in alignment we are with how it works, the more they have their own kind of natural energetic charge and they move through the system and they pass on through. And as I say, we're less bothered about them being there. So in my experience, they kind of just it's kind of paradoxical. The less we care about whether they're there or not, the less they kind of show up. And we can get caught in loops, as I say, of getting anxious about being anxious or being fearful of our fear or whatever it might be. it's really interesting to reflect on that. And that's probably been, because there's lots of different ideas in the world of spirituality and all this kind of stuff about what the most important things we can see are, living life in the now. And we've spoken about many of these things on this podcast together. But one of the things probably the thing that's had the most profound impact on my life is knowing that I don't need to control or run away from any of my feelings, knowing that none of them are bad, none of them are negative. They just are. Sure, some of them are kind of more dysregulating or less they kind of mess up the system a bit more than others, and they're harder to hold on to. They're more dysregulating. But that's okay. It doesn't make them wrong, and it doesn't mean we can't handle it, and it doesn't mean our system isn't built for it, because it is, Our systems are built for that. It's not the acute experience of these things that's the issue. It's very often the innocent misunderstanding and the thought that we can't handle it, so we push these things down, we repress them, or we run away from them. It's actually in walking towards them and in welcoming them that often we have a profound insight into, as I say, how safe they are and how beautiful they all are. And that's probably been the biggest thing for me, which is kind of crazy to me, because if you'd have asked me what my goal was as a teen, in my late teens or early 20s from spirituality, I'd have told you it would have been to get rid of my anxiety. And I think that's probably very common. It may be something that brings a lot of people to this conversation. So this may be something that comes as a bit of a shock. So sit with it this week and consider what I've said. Perhaps listen back to it, ponder it, and reach out and let me know what you hear. All right, team. I don't think I've got much else to say. It's lovely to be here with you. See you soon.